So I wanted to talk about Thor, Love and Thunder. You might say I'm a little bit late to the party on this one. The film was released all the way back in July, but I've just got around to seeing it now on Disney+, and I've got some thoughts on it. Thor, Love and Thunder is a pretty poor film, but what's interesting about it to me is that Love and Thunder is probably the film that has deviated the most from the Marvel film formula so far, at least until Werewolf by Night gets here. What do I mean when I say that Thor, Love and Thunder deviates from the typical Marvel movie formula? Well, this film is pretty much just a straight up comedy. It has no pretensions whatsoever about being taken seriously. And this is also Love and Thunder's biggest problem. It's a comedy, and it's not a good one. I found Love and Thunder to be a really jarring watch. Not just because of the ropey looking CGI, although that had a lot to do with it too, but because the comedy isn't even the usual Marvel comedy we get in the other films. The comedy in this film is more like what you'd get in a rated PG adventure film for kids. It's almost slapstick humour a lot of the time. Love and Thunder for me feels like the first Marvel Studio film that wasn't made for general audiences. It feels like it was made for a really young crowd. I could see Love and Thunder being played between episodes of Paw Patrol on Nickelodeon. Marvel have always taken the approach of winking at the audience when it comes to the more off-the-wall stuff in their films, but here Taika Waititi has given up any attempt at playing it even kind of straight with Love and Thunder. Everything is a joke, everything is goofy, and because everything is goofy, nothing matters. You can't take Thor seriously, you can't take Jane's battle with cancer seriously, you don't take Gore or his plan seriously. Thor isn't really anything like how he is in the other Marvel films, to the extent that he almost feels like a totally new character. And this isn't unique to Thor either, it's true for the other returning characters in Love and Thunder as well. Valkyrie, Jane Foster, they're more like sitcom characters this time around. They're goofy, they're saying silly things, they're dropping one-liners. Their characters seem totally off. None of it feels right or authentic to what we've seen from these characters in the previous films. Thor Love and Thunder is the kind of film you get when you give a director total freedom to do whatever he wants. And while that's a good thing for some directors, I don't think it's a good thing for Taika Waititi after watching Love and Thunder. And don't get me wrong, I don't like when studios start reining in their talent, but with Love and Thunder, it feels like Waititi just leaned into the comedy and the off-the-wall goofiness to a really indulgent and detrimental degree here. I don't think anyone was really challenging his decisions. And after seeing some decisions that Waititi went with for Love and Thunder, I think he would have seriously benefited from someone just asking him, is this really a good idea, Taika? Can we just get one scene where a character is being sincere, one scene where the impact isn't immediately diminished by a character saying or doing something stupid? There's a character literally dying of stage 4 cancer. Can we give that some weight? Can we take that seriously? The screaming goats are funny the first time, they're not funny the 15th. The same with Thor speaking with his axe as if it's a jilted girlfriend. It's not funny, it's just really silly. You could add a laugh track over some of these scenes and it really wouldn't feel out of place. Sif, the last friend Thor has from his childhood, shows up at one point. She's just had her arm ripped off, looks like she isn't going to pull through. But nope, this too is played for laughs, because of course it is, everything here is a joke. It's like there was some mandate in the script that every 30 or so seconds something goofy has to happen, some character has to say or do something really dumb. Zeus shows up in this film played by Russell Crowe and it's just one joke after another the whole of his screen time. And I was thinking that whole time during Zeus's exchange with Thor, how much more weight this scene would have had. Thor and Zeus talking, the gods of thunder and lightning from different pantheons actually talking with each other, if this was played as anything other than a total joke. Another potentially memorable scene sacrificed for a forgettable comedy bit. What was really disappointing for me was that I thought from the trailers we'd be getting a Thor that was more wise, less interested in fighting after the events of Endgame, but instead Love and Thunder feels like more of a regression for Thor's character to somewhere before even the first Kenneth Branagh Thor film. It'd be nice if we could see some growth here for Thor, at least get the impression that Thor was wiser after all the stuff he'd been through, but nah, Taika Waititi has no interest in doing that. What's really irritating about Love and Thunder too is the wasted potential of it. Christian Bale is a really great get as a villain, but the script does nothing to elevate him beyond a generic vengeful bad guy. I mean, why bother casting Christian Bale for this role if you're not going to give him something to do? There's one or two scenes in this film where you can really see the potential that Bale could bring to this character, but the script doesn't give him anything at all to work with. It's like Christopher Eccleston in The Dark World or Mads Mikkelsen in Doctor Strange, talented actors given roles with nothing to do. You can say the same thing about Natalie Portman as Thor. It's an idea that had real potential, but it's rushed and totally squandered. There's a really interesting and impactful story that could have been developed there, with Jane Foster becoming sicker and sicker the more she uses Mjolnir. It's fertile ground for the MCU, man, a hero with cancer. but the writers had no interest whatsoever in developing that angle at all. What could have been the emotional through line of the film was basically relegated to an inconsequential B-plot. And what's most grating of all about Thor Love and Thunder is that you can do so much more with this material, but Taika is too in love with the goofiness and the easy jokes to actually explore anything that has any actual depth. I was looking forward to Love and Thunder after seeing Ragnarok. I thought Taika was a good pick to handle Thor. I thought he'd do something really interesting with this character and this world, but he really doesn't. Instead of just doing anything ambitious, he goes for the low effort, low hanging fruit, silly jokes and a pointless, meaningless story. You know what I'm really looking forward to, man? God of War Ragnarok. I love the God of War series, I've played all of them, and that last one was easily the best, my favourite of the whole series. What I loved about 2018's God of War the most was how Santa Monica Studios took the core Norse mythology and adapted it. You can tell the writers really had a lot of respect for it. They tweaked and changed a few things, sure, but the changes were interesting, and what's more, these changes actually made the story of the game really compelling. They took the Norse mythology and did some amazing world building with it. In contrast to that, this is what mythology and world building in Thor Love and Thunder looks like now. This is Asgard. We went from a fully realised place in the first Thor film that had its own culture, its own technology, its own distinct look, to this. Mythology around Thor and Asgard is treated as a total joke, just like everything else. The Asgardians are just a bunch of quirky people now who dress and act like everyone else. The Walter Simonson run has some fantastic stories. The actual Norse mythology is super interesting stuff, but Waititi doesn't look to have any interest in mining that potential. He's more interested in showing you a comedy montage of how Thor and Jane Foster broke up than he is in a story where, say, Thor has to travel across the 9 realms on a quest or has to work with Beta Ray Bill to stop some ancient Asgardian threat. You can do so much more with Thor than just having him be this goofball character all of the time. Hemsworth is great at the comedy stuff, but you know what he's also great at? Scenes like these.
Well, if I'm wrong, then what more could I lose? I told you. You'd die for that.
This is the Thor I want to see more of. It's like somewhere along the line someone at Marvel Studios put down a mandate that because Hemsworth had good comedic timing, Thor has to be a comic relief character going forward from now on. People give the whole fat Thor storyline from Endgame a hard time, but I liked it, man, because it actually explores what happens to a hero when he fails to stop a villain that goes on to do something horrible. Thor threw his axe at Thanos and only wounded him when he should have killed him, and as a result of that one mistake, Thanos went on to snuff out half of all life in existence. Of course, that's going to mess with your head, and while the Fat Thor storyline was mostly played for laughs, there was a genuine sentiment behind it. It was an idea worth exploring, and it was explored for the most part. Not in as much depth or as seriousness as it deserved, but you got the point. Thor had to put his past behind him and become a hero again. That story in Avengers Endgame had more character development for Thor than this whole solo film devoted to him. Look, I'm not saying that Thor can't be funny some of the time. He can, there's absolutely room for that. But not all of the time, and not at the expense of his character. This guy is so much more when you embrace all sides of his character. I can't really talk about Thor Love and Thunder and also not talk about the CGI. The effects for this film are, to put it mildly, dog rough. Everything has this low quality, textureless feel to it that's becoming synonymous with Marvel films now. Some of the scenes in this film look like they're from low budget made for TV science fiction films, which is such a shame when you compare it to Waititi's previous Thor film. Ragnarok had some really nice visuals. This problem with CGI really is something Marvel needs to get ahead of. The first film where this was really noticeable for me was Black Panther all the way back in 2018, and you think Disney would have taken steps to fix this problem by now, but no, it's only gotten worse over the last few years, to the point that Love and Thunder is probably one of the worst looking films that Disney has produced. The only thing Disney needs to do to fix this problem is slow down their content pipeline and give their artists additional time to work on these projects. But since they're 100% absolutely not going to do that, I guess we're all going to have to settle for early 2000s PlayStation 2 CGI cutscene graphics for all future films and shows going forward. That's really great. Taika Waititi is a really talented director and he's got a unique vision. I really like Thor Ragnarok. It's got a beautiful colour palette and a visual style that sets it apart from the other films in the MCU. And unlike Thor Love and Thunder, it's a film that finds a nice balance between action, adventure, and comedy. As a director, I'm happy for Taika to stick around the MCU, but maybe giving him a writing credit on the next Thor film isn't such a good idea. It's something you hear a lot from the critics of the MCU, but it's very true at this point. The humour in the Marvel films is kind of overdone now. I want to see Marvel chill out on the humour. Marvel's best films have always been the ones that they've taken the story, the characters, the world more seriously. I feel Marvel are just in the habit of going for the easy laugh instead of the more impactful and memorable story and character moments. Humour is fine, man, but it's not fine when it comes at the cost of the characters, the world, or the tone of these films. Can you imagine what injecting a joke every 5 minutes into Winter Soldier or Civil War would have done to those films? And I know some people say it's okay to have some jokes in there too, and yeah, it is, but sometimes it's okay to take this stuff just a little bit more seriously as well. With Love and Thunder, Waititi seems to have forgotten that a film can be more than just funny. It can have a compelling story with a compelling cast of characters. It can have character progression and actual stakes. It can be more than just one thing. It's an argument that gets thrown around the internet a lot. Don't take it so seriously, these films are just for kids. This argument can also come in another form. It's a movie about space wizards intended for children. I'm sorry, but those aren't arguments. They're excuses in favour of lazy storytelling. You should want and expect more from the movies you watch than silly jokes and lazy writing. Star Wars isn't just space wizards with swords. That's such a stupid and reductive way of looking at cinema. It's so much more than that, and the MCU is no different. Is Toy Story just a stupid kids movie? No, it's not. It actually made you feel something, and that's what the directors of these films should aspire to do. Actually make you feel something, actually make you think about these characters and these worlds. Thor can be more than just a silly, disposable comedy movie. And what's worse is that the Thor comics don't handle Thor, his world, or these characters like this. The whole Asgardian mythos isn't a joke in the comics. The comics don't talk down to the audience, but Love and Thunder does. I've read the comics, man, and I know this material can be way more impactful and meaningful than this. It just needs a director and a writer who wants to explore the character and this world more. Lighthearted adventures in space with Thor and his mates is a fine idea, but it can't just all be jokes. It needs to have some heart to it too. It needs to have some actual substance. Thor is only a comedy series now because that's what it's been treated as, and it doesn't need to be that. There's so much potential there, and what's more, we've seen other directors tap into that same potential. If you go back to the first Thor film, it actually had a lot more going on. There was pathos to those characters. Asgard was a fleshed out place. Thor actually went through a memorable arc in that first film. I only hope that the higher ups at Marvel will take inspiration from that first film when they're deciding what direction to take Thor in for his next adventure. It might not be such a bad idea to get Kenneth Branagh back on the phone when thinking about what direction to take Thor in next. As always, thanks guys for watching.